So face challenges head on, work one step at a time, take time to celebrate and assess what you reach when you reach it, or rather when you reach every milestone. So, in other words, motivation shouldn't be coming from the outside. It should really be coming from the inside. True motivation comes from the inside, where you realize and you discover really why you are here and why it matters. Why your contribution matters to the bigger picture, to the big organization, to every single client that you serve. And when you see the difference that you make, that will come back to you 100 times. And that should be encouragement enough to continue doing what you're doing because you know the purpose you're serving, right? But also take time to celebrate the little milestones that you achieve, because many times we have the tendency of running and running and running and running, and we never quite get to a place where we celebrate sufficiently enough each milestone. Let's talk about empathy. Number 3, empathy. Be aware of the moods and viewpoints of others. Practice acts of kindness on purpose. Be generous and reliable and slow to judge. This is very critical. I've seen way too many people, dealing conflict in probably ways that instead of solving the conflict, they exacerbate the conflict. For example, in our organization, there's a deep culture of sending emails and dealing matters on emails. And probably because people feel the need to cover themselves. And if that is the case, it stands to reason that trust is a problem. People send emails to each other as proof that they've addressed a particular issue. But them addressing it in that manner does not mean that the issue is resolved. If anything, if you're feeling highly emotional about something, it doesn't matter what it is, and then you take a time and you write an email to the person that has offended you or that has probably come short of your expectations, while you're feeling all of that emotion, and you type an email, instead of that person reading that as genuinely someone who really would like an issue to be resolved, the problem is once you click send, that other person, you have lost power of how the other individual receives and perceives the email that you would have written probably with all good intention in an attempt to solve problems. Think about that for a moment. The culture of emails has robbed us of personal touch, has robbed us of conversation. Sometimes that conversation can easily be solved by a telephone, but instead we resort to an email, which, by the way, you type and the other person is busy with whatever it is they're busy with. They might be with a client, they might be out of office, they may only get to that email 3 hours, 4 hours later in the evening, the following day. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you are interpreting it as this person doesn't care. They haven't even been replied to my email. We need to stop that, because empathy requires that you put yourself obviously in the other person's shoes, but more importantly, that you become aware of the other person's viewpoints and moods, so that when you approach them, you don't only approach them because there's an issue that you want to address, but you want to approach them because you also are trying to get a response that is positive out of them. Let's talk about social skills. You can see I'm sniffing a little bit. The weather in Joburg is rather interesting. It's quite hot, and I'm coming from a very cold PE in East London. Social skills, right? Social skills. One would ask why. So EQ, rather, when we talk about one of the components of EQ is social skills, and we're talking here about reaching out to others, listen well and work to diffuse disputes. Trust that your ideas add to the conversation. So I'm not talking about you becoming the life wire of the party, or suddenly an extrovert overnight. I certainly am not an extrovert. I'm aware of that. But how I deal with it is I always strive to become socially relevant. Whatever situation I may find myself surrounded by people, intimidating as it may be at times, I'm confident in who I am. And because I am, and I know what purpose I fulfill in any given, situation, I show up on purpose, right? If you do the same, and you start reaching out to others in your little ways. You don't have to be a mega super public speaker, but on a one-on-one basis, start reaching out, start smiling a little bit more, start greeting a little bit more. You will find that your influence will begin to extend far beyond even just your immediate so-called department. Okay, let's talk about the last one, self-regulation, right? Or self-discipline, as I prefer to call it. Learn self-calming techniques. Allow emotions to pass through you. Reflect before making decisions. Very critical one, that last sentence. Reflect before making decisions, right? When you are self-aware, there are greater chances of you self-regulating. So in other words, you know situations that push you to behave in a certain manner. You are aware of situations or things or triggers that happen that push you in a certain direction. But when you learn to reflect a little bit more, you make better decisions 9 out of 10 times. Okay? You may ask, what are the benefits of EQ or an improved EQ? As I close on this, while IQ is important, rather, the higher you go in leadership, in an organization, just in any sphere of life, the higher you go, the more EQ you're going to need. The second thing, EQ informs the ability to handle complexity. You see, as a leader, the more you grow as a leader, the more you climb up the corporate ladder, it becomes less about your technical ability, but more about your EQ, because you have to have the resilience, which is only brought about by EQ, and the ability or capacity to handle complex situations and people. It's not about the technical know-how. It's about your ability to handle complexity, and EQ will give you that. EQ enables diversity management, and I think I've sort of alluded that to the last point, right? When your EQ level is heightened and elevated, it becomes less about how individuals look, how they speak, what background they're from. You simply see past all of their so-called obvious limitations and all their so-called physical attributes, and you see the potential in people. You therefore become less biased and more about what's best for the people and what's best for the business. EQ cushions the blow of constructive feedback. You see, feedback, when you give someone feedback about something that they may have fallen short of, something that they could do better, or suggesting something to someone, very often that feedback is taken negatively. It's almost interpreted as an attack. But you see, when your EQ level begins to elevate, it becomes the very cushion, or the very, the very cushion that sort of decreases or reduces the blow of what would otherwise have been interpreted as an attack. That is now constructive feedback. EQ makes one a more versatile leader. I cannot express that all the more. The higher your EQ, the more versatile you are. In other words, you can be put into any environment, however pressurized or however complex, you become more versatile because your level of EQ is such that you're able to look at issues for what they are and see the potential solution beyond just the issue. EQ breeds the resilience required in a fast-changing environment. We live in a fast-changing environment. Discovery is starting a bank. We know the greatest disruptor in the South African context of banking, Capitec. They've now surpassed all the other colleagues or competitors we have. We're the only last bank standing in terms of customer numbers that's leading the country at the moment. However, the point I'm making is As fast as the environment changes, you need a lot of EQ to be able to adapt. In fact, to be able to even preempt the changes that will inevitably come. Second, lastly, EQ may well be the difference between your now and your next. EQ will be the difference between your now and your next. I can't say that even more. EQ demands that you reflect more on your own actions. Very often when we reflect, we always reflect from a defensive position. He did this, she did that. It is the system, it is the company, it is this, it is that. No. EQ is about reflecting on your own actions. It's about taking your power back. It's about, coming out of the victim box, the victim, comfort zone that allows you to point fingers at other things and everything that is around you except the person in the mirror. EQ demands that you reflect more on your own actions. And when you do that, you then find that actually solutions to the issues that are outside of you are actually inside of you. And that's how we close it. Lastly, let me close with this quote. IQ, meaning the so-called intelligence, IQ gets you hired, but EQ gets you promoted. Enjoy the rest of the session. God bless you, colleagues. Together we rise.